7 million Americans just had their student loan safety net legally shredded, and the replacement plan changes the math of higher education forever.
It is a total reset of the system.
It really is. Welcome to the deep dive. We're jumping right into a fast-moving and frankly monumental situation today. If you have student loans, if you're planning to go to college, or honestly,
We just pay taxes in the United States.
exactly. You need to hear this. Let's start with a 90-second news hook to get you totally up to speed on what just happened.
Right. So on March 9th, 2026, the Eighth Circuit Court of Appeals officially killed the Biden-era HAS VE repayment plan. Several Republican-led states had successfully sued to block the program.
And they argued it overstepped the administration's legal authority, right?
Right. And now, a December 2025 settlement has been entered as a final judgment.
Which means a permanent ban on any new enrollment.
Yeah.
And a permanent ban on loan forgiveness under the SAVE program. The program is officially dead. And the immediate stakes for borrowers are just incredibly high. I mean, millions of people are stuck in a frustrating legal limbo right now. While you were placed in what's called SAVE forbearance, meaning you didn't have to make monthly payments, the interest actually started accruing again on August 1st, 2025.
Exactly. Loan balances have been growing quietly in the background, but crucially, the time you spend sitting in this frozen state, it does not count toward public service loan forgiveness,
Wow.
or PSLF. It also doesn't count towards standard income-driven repayment cancellation. You are effectively losing valuable time while your debt just gets more and more expensive.
It's like running on a treadmill that keeps speeding up, but the timer hasn't even started.
That's a great way to put it.
To help you understand exactly how to navigate this maze, we are looking at a stack of incredibly detailed sources today. We've got a sweeping Government Accountability Office report, official press releases from the Department of Education, recent court documents, and some really eye-opening financial analyses.
And our mission for this deep dive is clear. We're going to unpack exactly what the end of the SAVE plan means for you, how the brand new repayment assistance plan works, the strict new borrowing caps taking effect soon, and a hidden crisis in government oversight that could cost borrowers and taxpayers dearly.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the human cost of this court ruling, because we aren't just talking about abstract legal jargon here. This is about real people watching their debt spiral out of control.
It's not just numbers on a spreadsheet.
No, definitely not. Our sources highlight a borrower named Elizabeth Robeson, and her story completely grounds the data for me. She borrowed $12,000 back in the 1980s to pay for college. She made her required payments consistently for decades.
But today, because of how the interest piles up, her balance is currently $93,000.
From $12,000, it's just wild.
It's a staggering example of what happens with negative amortization. For anyone unfamiliar, negative amortization occurs when your required monthly payment isn't actually big enough to cover the interest that your loan generates that month.
So the leftover interest just gets added to your total balance.
Exactly. Under the old SAVE plan, the government heavily subsidized that unpaid interest to keep balances from growing. But with the plan terminated, borrowers like Elizabeth, who are sitting in this administrative forbearance, they're watching their balances inflate all over again.
Right, the guardrails are gone. So for the 7 million people waking up to this reality, what are the urgent, concrete actions they need to take right now? Because clearly, waiting around is the worst option.
Oh, absolutely. The very first thing you need to do is actively switch to a legally active repayment plan. You simply can't afford a wait-and-see approach. Experts strongly recommend submitting requests to transition into income-based repayment, or IBR.
Because you want to get out of the forbearance status so your payments actually start counting toward forgiveness again.
Precisely.
And if you work in public service like teaching, nursing, or working for a nonprofit, you need to look into the PSLF buyback option. I was reading up on how this buyback works, and it's basically a time machine.
It really is.
It allows you to reclaim credit for the months your account was frozen. You apply to pay the exact amount you would have owed during those frozen months, and in exchange, those months suddenly count toward your 10 years of required public service payments.
If you're close to the finish line, you absolutely have to do this. It's a vital lifeline. But there's another looming issue we have to address here, and that's the ticking tax clock.
Oh, right, the tax bomb.
Yeah. Under current tax law, if you qualify for income-driven repayment cancellation after the year 2025, the IRS might treat that forgiven debt as taxable income.
Let me break that down because this is a seismic detail. Let's say you earn $60,000 a year at your job, but you finally hit your 20 years of payments in 2026, and the government forgives $50,000 of your student loans.
Which sounds like a huge win.
Right. But the IRS could look at that and say, congratulations, your income this year was actually $110,000. You're going to owe taxes on that phantom $50,000. It's like winning a car in a game show, but having to sell the car just to pay the taxes on it.
Exactly. It's a massive financial shock.
Mm-hmm.
That's why it is incredibly urgent for borrowers who've already made 20 or 25 years of payments to switch out of SAVE immediately. If you can get your loans officially canceled before the end of 2025, you avoid that devastating tax bomb.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The student loan landscape isn't just losing an old plan, it's gaining a brand new one. It's called the Repayment Assistance Plan, or RAP.
Yes.
This was created under President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill Act, which Congress passed, and it officially launches on July 1st, 2026. This totally rewrites the rulebook for how you pay back the federal government.
It really does. We need to look at the stark mathematical differences between the dead SAVE plan and the new RAP system. Because RAP uses a sliding scale, and it's calculated from your adjusted growth income, or AGI.
And just to clarify for everyone listening, your AGI isn't your total gross salary. It's what is left over after certain tax deductions. So if you make $65,000 a year, but you put $5,000 into a 401k or a traditional IRA...
Your AGI is actually $60,000.
Right. That's the number the government uses for this math.
Spot on. So using that AGI, the RAP scale ranges from 1% to 10%. The math works like this. If you earn under $10,000 a year, you pay a minimum of $10 a month. From there, your rate climbs by 1% for every extra $10,000 you're on.
Okay.
And it maxes out at a 10% rate for incomes over $100,000. They also drop your monthly payment by $50 for each dependent you claim on your taxes.
That sounds pretty structured on paper, but how does it actually hit your wallet compared to the old system? Because the numbers in the financial analysis are pretty jarring.
They are. Let's take a family of 4 earning an AGI of $81,000. Under the old SAVE plan, that family paid $36 a month. Under the new RAP system, they will pay $440 a month.
Wow.
Or let's look at a single borrower making $57,000. Under SAVE, they paid $140 a month. Under RAP, they'll pay $238 a month.
That is a serious jump in the monthly budget. I mean, if you're that family of 4, finding an extra $400 a month is going to hurt. And our sources point out a crucial detail here. RAP doesn't have a payment cap at the top end.
Correct. Because there's no payment cap, higher earners people making well over $100,000 could end up paying hundreds more per month than they ever did previously. Your payment just keeps scaling with your income.
But RAP does have some unique mechanisms built into it to help with the total debt amount. It isn't all just higher monthly bills. I was looking at how RAP attacks the principal balance, and it's genuinely fascinating. The government doesn't just stop the interest from growing, they actively help you pay it down.
What's fascinating here is how aggressive that mechanism is. Just like SAVE, the RAP system eliminates negative amortization. The government steps in and subsidizes the remainder of the interest that your monthly payment doesn't cover.
So your balance won't grow.
Right. But RAP goes one huge step further. For every on-time monthly payment you make, the government actually pays up to $50 directly toward your principal balance.
That entirely flips the psychology of paying debts. Under the old plans, people felt completely defeated making payments for 5 years and seeing their balance go up. Now, even if your required payment is low, that government match is physically chipping away at the core debt. It changes the math.
It does.
But speaking of the math, the timeline to actually get your loans forgiven has stretched out significantly.
That is the ultimate trade-off here. Under the old SAVE plan, some borrowers with low initial balances could see forgiveness in as little as 10 years.
Right.
Most standard income-driven plans took 20 or 25 years.
Right.
Under RAP, every single participant is required to make 30 years of qualifying payments before any remaining balance is forgiven.
30 years. Let's just pause on that. That is essentially a mortgage timeline. You take out the loans at 22 when you graduate,
Imagine
and you are
finding out
paying
your
them until you're
electric
52
bill
years old.
is
If
secretly
we connect
funding
this
the
to the
government's
bigger
massive
picture,
spending addiction.
treating a bachelor's
It is
degree like
a
a
pretty
30-year
shocking
mortgage
realization when you actually
fundamentally
look at the math.
alters
Right.
American life
Well,
milestones.
imagine for a second that
It
you have a
delays
savings
buying a
account.
house, it delays having
And,
kids, and it
you
seriously
swore to
cuts
your
into a
family,
person's
hand over heart,
ability to save for
that
retirement.
this money was
It's a
strictly for
generational
fixing a
shift in
leaking
how
roof.
debt is managed.
You said,
But let's
if we
pivot
don't
away
fix
from the
this
people
roof,
already paying
the
off
house
their
is going to
loans.
collapse.
We
It's
need
an
to talk about the
existential
people
crisis
who
for the
haven't
house.
borrowed
Exactly.
yet,
It's the
or
save the
who are
house
heading to
fund.
graduate school
But then,
soon.
your car breaks down.
Because the rules of the
Spend a
game
little
have
too much on
completely
groceries.
changed for
You've
them
got
too.
bills piling up.
The days
So
of
what
the
do?
blank check,
You raid the roof.
graduate
You
PLUS
take that money,
loans
pay off
are
your credit
officially
cards, and
over.
tell your
Which
family,
is
hey, don't worry, we'll
huge.
fix the
Previously,
roof
a
later.
graduate
Right.
student could
And
borrow
in
up
this
to the full
scenario,
cost of
the roof
tuition,
is the
whatever the
planet,
university
or at
decides
least
to
Maryland's
charge.
climate goals.
If a master's degree
And the
costs
car is a
$80,000
massive
a year, the
self-inflicted
government would happily lend you $80,000 a
$1.5
year.
billion
But the new
state
rules
budget
institute
A completely
strict,
avoidable
hard
deficit, I might
borrowing
add.
limits.
Welcome to the deep
They
dive.
split postgraduate
Today we're
students
exploring
into
a
two
classic
distinct
case
categories.
of fiscal
Right.
sleight
First,
of
you
hand
have
coming
standard
out of
graduate
Annapolis.
students. They are
We
now
are looking
capped
at the
at borrowing
strategic energy investment
$20,500
fund,
annually,
the SAIF,
with a strict lifetime
It's a
limit
huge
of
pot of money
$100,000 meant to save the
And
environment.
the sources
But it's
specifically
turning into a
note that
hidden
nursing
tax
and public
on every
health
single
degrees
person
fall into
paying an
that
electric
standard
bill
graduate
in
category
Maryland.
now.
It
They don't
really
get the
is. It's
higher
become the
limits.
center of a
Think
huge
about the
political
implications
fight.
of that.
You've got
We have
a Democratic
nationwide
governor,
nursing
frustrated
shortage,
environmentalists
and now a
making some
prospective
very
student
awkward
has a hard
compromises,
cap of
and conservative
$20,000 a
critics
year
who are
to
rightly
pay
calling
for a
this whole
degree
thing
that
a
might
shell
cost
game.
A shell
double that.
game.
That is a
And
detail
when you
that
look
is
at the
severely
documents we have
alarming
today,
professional
reports,
associations in
budget
those healthcare
proposals,
fields.
critiques from Senate
Now,
Republicans,
the second
it is
category
really
is
hard to
professional
unsee it.
students.
Our mission for this deep dive
This
is
covers
simple.
aspiring
Follow the
doctors,
money.
lawyers,
Always follow the
veterinarians,
money.
and
We are going to
dentists.
see
The
how
really
a fund
expensive degrees.
designed to fight
Exactly.
climate change
They're permitted
is
to
being
borrow
used to
up to
plug holes in the state
$50,000
budget.
annually.
And we'll
with
dig
a
into the
lifetime
argument
limit
that
of
this isn't found money at
$200,000.
all.
Parent
This is
PLUS
essentially
loans
a
are getting
backdoor
clamped
tax
down,
on
too.
families.
Parents
Let's
taking out
get right
loans
into
to help
it.
their
The
undergrads are now
Strategic
capped
Energy
at
Investment Fund
$20,000 a
sounds
year.
very official,
And
very important.
$65,000
What does it
total
actually do?
per student.
Which is a
on
massive
paper.
change.
It is
When
the
you read
state's
through the
green
economic
piggy
analyses
bank.
in our sources,
The SIF is
you
managed
see
by the
two
Maryland
completely
Energy
competing
Administration.
philosophies
Its whole
about these
stated
caps.
purpose is to reduce
Proponents
energy
argue
bills,
that this will
cut
finally
waste,
put
and
downward
fund
pressure on
renewable
universities
energy.
to lower their
Like
tuition.
solar panels and efficiency
The logic
upgrades.
is simple.
Exactly.
If the federal
But here
government
is the
stops
real
handing
aha
out
moment of the
unlimited
story.
cash, the colleges will be forced
Where does
to
the money
drop prices
actually
to match
come
what students
from?
can actually
Because
afford
they
to
aren't just
borrow.
taxing
On
you
the other
directly
side,
for it.
critics warn that
No, and that's why
universities simply
politicians
won't lower
absolutely
their
love it
prices
if fast
fast enough,
enough,
or at
so
all.
about 40% comes from
Instead,
regional
they
carbon
argue this will
auctions.
drive desperate
But
students
the big
straight
chunk,
into
the one
the
growing
private
like
loan
crazy,
market to make
comes
up
from
the
something
difference.
called alternative
Private
compliance
loans generally
payments,
lack federal
or
protections.
ACPs.
They
Which is
don't
just a
offer
fancy government term
income-driven
for a fine.
repayment safety
Right.
nets.
It's a fine for
and they
failure.
certainly
Let me
don't
break it
offer
down.
any sort of
Maryland
forgiveness
law
after
forces
30 years.
utility
All right,
companies
so
to
what does
buy
this
a
all mean?
certain amount of
We've got
green
new
energy.
rules,
They have
new
new 30-year
30-year renewables.
timelines, a
But if
looming
they can't
tax
find that
bomb,
green
and
energy,
strict
or if it's
new
just
caps
way too expensive on the
altering
market,
how people
which
pay
it
for grad
usually is.
school.
yeah, the state
This
gives them an
utility can
escape
just
hatch.
require a
The
monumental
utility can
amount
just
of
pay a fee
paperwork,
directly to
customer
the state
service,
instead.
and government
That
management.
fee is the ACP.
And that brings us to the
And here's
administrative
the kicker.
crisis happening behind the scenes.
Utilities are
This is where the
increasingly
March
just paying the
2026
fine
Government
because it's cheaper than
Accountability
actually
Office report
buying the
becomes
green
essential
energy.
reading.
Wait, so
The Office of
Climate
Federal
Fund is
Student
getting
Aid, or
incredibly
FSA,
rich. Is the agency
precisely
responsible for
because
managing this
the green energy
$1.6
mandates
trillion
are failing.
portfolio?
Precisely. It is a completely
As 7 million
perverse
borrowers try to
incentive.
navigate
The
this
government
massive,
made the mandates
confusing
so aggressive
transition,
and the market is so
the
distorted
FSA has
that power
drastically
companies
cut
are
its
just writing
workforce.
checks to the state
The
instead of
numbers in the
going green.
report
And
are
the stats
wild.
on this are just
Between
staggering.
January
They
and
are.
December of
In
2025,
2022,
the
this
FSA
revenue
staff
staff
dropped
$7
from
million.
1,433
By 2025,
employees
it jumped
down to just
765
777.
They lost almost half their people in a single year.
to
Half.
365
And the direct
million in
result of
3
those
years.
cuts
Right, so
is
now
a
the
severe
state has
reduction
this
in basic oversight.
massive accidental
Because they
pot of
simply
gold.
lacked the
It's
staff
supposedly
capacity,
for green
the
projects.
FSA completely
But
stopped
remember, that
assessing
money
their
didn't just
contracted
fall
loan
out of the
servicers
sky.
for
The utility
accuracy and
companies
call
paid
quality
those fines.
in February 2025.
And do you think those
That's
massive
genuinely
corporations charging. Just to be clear for everyone, the loan servicers are the private
Oh,
companies that
absolutely
actually
not.
hold
They
your
pass
account,
every single
process
penny
your
of that
monthly
onto the
payments,
customer.
and answer the
Exactly.
phone
It shows
when
up
called.
right on
If
your
the
electric
government
bill.
stops
So
checking
you,
their work,
the everyday
the
ratepayer,
stakes for
are
you,
paying
the
for the
listener,
utilities'
are
failure to
incredibly
meet
high.
a government mandate.
Imagine
The
sitting
state
on
collects
hold
your money,
for 3 hours,
drops it in the
finally
safe,
getting
and
a
says,
representative,
"Look at all this
and
cash
they
we
make a
have for the
simple
climate."
data entry
Which brings us
mistake.
to the raid.
You could get billed for the completely
Because
wrong
that
amount.
money is
You could be
definitely
placed
not
into the wrong
staying in the
repayment
climate
plan.
fund.
Not
You could even
anymore.
be denied
Enter
a
Governor
timely
Wes
refund that you were
Moore.
legally owed.
His
And
administration
now
is staring
there's
down a
nobody
projected
auditing them to catch that
$1.5
mistake.
billion
And
budget
beyond the
deficit.
sheer frustration for the individual
$1.5
borrower,
billion.
there's a
You can't just
serious
ignore a
financial
hole
risk
that
to the
deep.
federal
You can't.
government.
And
The
when
GAO
government
report
overspends
highlights
to that
that
degree,
before
they
stop
start
these
checking
audits,
under the couch
4
cushions
out of
for
the
loose
5
change.
major loan servicers
Except
actually
here, the
failed
couch
the
cushion
government's
is the green
accuracy
energy
standards.
fund,
4 out of
and
5.
the loose
Yes.
change is
In the
hundreds of
past,
millions
the
of
government used
taxpayer
those
dollars.
audits to
So
withhold
what's the
about
actual proposal? How much are they
$850,000
taking?
in
The
financial
governor's
penalties
plan
from those
diverts
failing companies.
$292
So by stopping the
million
audits, the government
directly
is
from the
essentially
SAVE
giving up
into
its
the
main
state's general
tool for
fund.
punishing
Just to
bad
balance
behavior.
the books.
Just
It's
to
like
cover their
driving a massive
overspending.
cargo truck down a
They
steep
are
mountain,
using energy
but deciding
fines
to
to
stop
pay
checking the
for
brakes
general
just to save
government
some time.
operations.
Exactly.
Bureaucracy, salaries,
Without these
office
assessments,
supplies, you name
The
it.
government
But that's
risks
not even all of it.
overpaying
Yeah.
these
I read in the
servicers for
sources
terrible
there's also a
performance.
rebate scheme.
There are no
Yes,
financial
this is the
consequences
part
for the
critics are
servicers
calling a
if they
political
mess up your
sweetener.
account.
They're grabbing another
Now, the
$100
Department of
million
Education
out
responded
of
to
the
the GAO
fund to give a
report, and they
one-time
strongly
$40
disagree with the
rebate to
findings.
eligible households.
They argue they
$40.
don't need the old
Earbuds.
audit methods
So let me get this
because
straight.
they use other
The state
tools
mandates
like
drive up
cross-system
energy
data
costs.
validation, broad
The utility
surveys,
companies
and
pass those
executive
massive
leadership
costs
oversight.
to you and me.
But the independent
Our bills
auditors
go
don't
up by
seem
hundreds
convinced
of
by that
dollars a
defense
year.
at all.
They aren't.
And then the governor
Independent
takes a
financial
chunk of
auditors
our own
continue
money,
to flag the
hands us back
reliability
a
of the
crisp
government's student
$40
loan data
bill,
as a
and
material
basically
weakness.
says,
Material
you're
weakness.
welcome.
That
Yeah.
is the exact
That is
math.
strict
It's
accounting
wild.
terminology.
And if you look at the
meaning
recent
there is a
supplemental
reasonable
budget, they're
possibility
cutting or
that a
shifting
massive
another $80
error won't
million.
be
When you
prevented
add
or
all this up,
detected on a
this
timely
raid
basis.
depletes the fund by 82%.
This raises an important
82%
question.
of the fund
How can the
wiped
government
out.
maintain
Wiped out.
basic
Leaving only about
accountability when they're
$164
relying on
million for
external
the actual
contractors
green
to
initiatives
flawlessly
it was legally
transition
meant
millions
for?
of people
That is
into
not a
entirely
trap.
new financial
That's a total
products,
gutting.
all while cutting
And this
their
is where
own
the
oversight
politics
staff
gets
in
super
half.
interesting.
It's a
Because you would
recipe for
assume the
chaos.
environmentalist
If we
groups
connect this
like
to
the
the bigger
Sierra
picture,
Club or
you
the
can
Chesapeake
really see
Climate
the
Action
profound
Network,
structural
you'd
shift
assume they'd
happening
be
right now.
furious. We
They
are
were
firmly entering
initially
an era
when
of
this first
stricter
leaked. They
repayment
called it
calculations,
unacceptable. They
firm
said it was
federal
a huge
borrowing
mistake
caps,
to
and
use this
significantly
money as a
reduced government
petty
oversight.
cash drawer.
Without a doubt.
But
Whether you're
then
an
they
active
folded.
borrower
They
trying to
completely
calculate
folded.
your new
Now
monthly
they
budget,
are actually
a
supporting
future
parts
student
of
trying
the
to figure out how to
governor's
pay for a
spending
nursing
plan.
degree with capped
Talk about
loans,
strange
or just a
bedfellows.
taxpayer
Why
watching how
on
the
earth would
government
they do
manages a
that?
$1.6
If they truly
trillion
believe climate
asset.
change is an
The
existential
mechanics
crisis,
of the system
why
affect
let the
the
state
broader
raid
economy.
the
It's a
survival
complete
fund?
reset.
It's just
of the
raw
board.
political calculation.
And it leaves me
they
with
know
one
voters
final
are getting
provocative
crushed
thought
by
to mull
inflation and
over.
high energy bills.
We
right
talked
now.
earlier about
If
how
these
the
green
end of the
groups
blank
attack
check
a
grad
$40
PUI US
rebate,
loans,
even if it's a
might
total
force
gimmick,
universities to lower tuition.
they look like they don't
or
care
it might
about
force
working
students into
families.
private loans.
So they have to play
But
the
what
game.
about the
They are
colleges
swallowing
themselves?
a very
For
bitter
the last
pill.
2 decades,
In exchange
there's been
for
an
letting the
explosion
governor
of lower
raid
tier,
the fund
highly
today,
expensive private
they are
colleges
lobbying for a
that
new law
entirely
to
relied
create a
on
funding
that
floor in
federal
the
blank
future.
check to
Meaning
keep
what
their
exactly?
doors open.
Meaning they want to
If the
guarantee
government
that
caps
the
the
state
money
will
and
mandate
students refuse
roughly
to take out brutal private
$365
loans to
million
cover the gap,
a year
will we
on
see a
climate
sudden
spending moving
wave of
forward.
university
So they are throwing
bankruptcies?
today's
It's a real
taxpayers
possibility.
under
We
the
might
bus
be watching
to
the
lock in a
bursting of a
permanent
higher
claim on your
education
wallet later.
bubble that
That's
has been
the
inflating
gamble,
for 30
and it brings us
years.
right to
Something
the
to think
core
about as you
conservative
navigate
critique.
this new landscape.
People
Thanks for
like
joining
Senate
us on
Minority
this
Leader
deep
Steve
dive.
Hershey